Welcome to the IP2 podcast. I'm Shea Ashby, and as always, I'm joined by Felix Chung. We have a very special guest today, Travis Fryk, the owner and co-founder of DreamESCAPE Gaming in Leduc.
Travis founded DreamESCAPE in September of 2017, and their store is one key pillar for our Alberta FAB community, especially for our friends up north. DreamESCAPE is a very unique LGS that started as an escape room, but now offers a full selection of LGS staples of board games and card games. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Before we talk about DreamESCAPE and the business, can you give us a little elevator pitch about yourself and what got you into gaming and escape rooms?
Big fan of puzzles, strategy games growing up, both online or offline. And also was just looking for an opportunity to start a small business and open up something on my own.
So before you opened up DreamESCAPE, did you have a background in gaming, or were you had another job?
I actually worked as a primary care paramedic on an ambulance for about 5 years before opening up the business. And the plan was actually to open the business and go back to working on the ambulance. I had only left on a kind of a long-term leave. But once we had opened up, it kind of felt like I needed to stay and be a little bit more hands-on. So I ended up just kind of stepping back from the ambulance.
So I guess the original goal was to still have the business, but go back to your life as a paramedic, and thinking that the business was going to maintain itself, or did you have a partner that was going to spearhead it at that time?
Yeah, the plan was to, basically launch, kind of get some like operating guidelines and procedures and stuff in place to start hiring and train up some people. But between just the budget, I'm trying to scale out like a salary or paying employees and wanting to work out the kinks of like not just the rooms, but the day-to-day, bookings and the operations of the business. I just felt like I had to be kind of right there. So
okay, cool. So are you a gamer by nature? Do you prefer board games or video games? You mentioned puzzles.
When I was younger, I grew up playing with just like every system, starting with just the base Nintendo, then moving up to Sega and PlayStation, not really keeping with any one brand, kind of just jumped around to whatever. It wasn't until probably early adult that I decided to found, and of course, just like everybody, Catan. And Catan was kind of, again, the gateway to get into more of the tabletop. And that kind of became the more primary. I kind of gave up on consoles and playing I just felt it was more social to meet up and play in person.
So do you keep that joy of playing now that you've been in business around games for, 6 years or so? Is gaming still something that excites you and motivates you, or is it something that's more of a dollars and cents thing at this point?
So I definitely get excited when I see new games coming out and when I kind of do research on them, because I can't keep up with playing them. I get customers asking me if I played them, and it's just, I think the hobby, even since when I got into it, has exploded to the point where there's just so much coming out that I just can't keep up with it. But when I try to do a little bit of reading as much as I can on anything that we bring in, like the biggest one that's on my radar right now is Dune Imperium. It's like a deck building, worker placement, which are two big mechanics that I'm a fan of. But it's with the business, the issue now is finding the time outside of work to meet up and get those games in.
Well, let's talk about DreamESCAPE a little bit. And DreamESCAPE is a very, very unique store. And I want to talk about the unique part more before we start delving into cards and cardboard and all of that. And that's the escape room. Like, how did you come up with the concept of starting an escape room of all businesses out there?
Just after playing one, I loved it. And after my first one, I just ended up that week probably playing 5 more just to, I don't know, I just was obsessing about it. And then out of boredom, kind of, because the way I worked, rural EMS, so we work around the clock, 24 hours out at a base. And there's some downtime. And with the downtime, I kind of just started playing around with the idea of I could make an escape room. And just in
Mm.
Word document, I kind of made a flow, like a really rough flow chart of this puzzle leads to this puzzle, and what would the theme of the room be? How would I theme it? How could I use the theme in the puzzles? Eventually it started with 2 rooms that I basically had fully fleshed out in just a Word document. Again, step by step, but looking back at it, it seems like a lot of work and a lot of stuff had to happen and go right. And meeting up with realtors about lease and kind of feeling like I'm wasting their time, not thinking this will ever happen, and then one day getting approved for it and then thinking like, okay, well, this accidentally is actually going to happen.
Wow. No, that's really cool. And just try to explain this to me in simple terms because I'm not too familiar with escape rooms, but is it uncommon for someone to design their own escape rooms from scratch like you described? I always figured, and the way that I've heard other escape room entrepreneurs describe it, is there's kits that you can buy with like pre-made puzzles and all that. Like, I'm not sure which one is more common or not in the industry.
I can't say for certain which one's more common, but when I'm familiar with kind of what's out there and what's available, and so if I go to another escape room and I say, like, I can see props that I know where they got them from, or entire rooms, because you can also just buy props and you can buy full just turnkey escape rooms. You just provide the space and they'll drop it off with everything you need. Those do exist, and I know some places use them, but I know other places as well have their own design team. For me, it was very family oriented. I would do the Word document. I would tell my wife, mother-in-law, and mom, like, this is kind of the theme I want to go for. And then they got me. I never used it before, but Pinterest. They had me go on Pinterest, and they made a wall for all the rooms, and then they would send all the designs and themes and colors that they want to use. And so, got me using Pinterest, and then I'd kind of be like, yeah, this is what we're going for. Go nuts. And I'd kind of tell them what I envisioned, and they would do all the design, and then me and my dad would do a lot of the woodwork for everything in the room for actually building the props. I was lucky enough to have at my disposal just a lot of crafty people to kind of cut some of those costs, being that we did it all kind of ourselves.
So, how has the escape room industry changed in the last few years, or I guess in the last 6 years since you got into business?
When I was opening up, there were a lot of escape rooms opening up. I don't know the exact count in Edmonton. We have fortunately remained the only one in Edmonton, but only one in Leduc. But in Edmonton, I think they were getting, over a dozen. What happened recently with COVID, though, has really kind of called, unfortunately, a lot of that. They're coming out of COVID. There were quite a few less escape rooms in the city.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how have you adapted to be able to survive when many of those other stores weren't able to?
For us in particular, I think just having where it's just kind of me every day really helped. Like, I didn't have a group of employees that I had to try to deal with or lay off or anything like that. We kind of adapted by cutting hours quite heavily. I ended up kind of picking up another job, and if that job ran late, I'd just have to kind of sacrifice the hours at the escape room or have a family member sit at the desk. We've always ran it where it was basically just me at the store, so having that be controlled, I guess, was helpful. And then I'm really the only escape room I can think of that has the front end. So in COVID, when we couldn't run the rooms, we were at least able to operate as purely a retail place.
And that's I mean, that's a really good transition into our next topic, but before I take us there, this is a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to be the one man show, just carrying the load for the entire business through good times and through COVID and other upset conditions, I guess you could say. Like, is that something that you enjoy, being the owner, working for yourself, being the head of a one-man shop and all of that? Is that something that appeals to you?
I I definitely, yeah. There's definitely some goods and not so good things. Uh, it's kind of funny. A lot of the regulars almost get shocked if I'm not behind the desk when they walk in. I get like, in the past, in a pinch, I've had my sister go and just kind of sit at the desk. She knows how to run the rooms and run the till. At least she doesn't really know too much about the. She can't really help too much with like the card aspect of that stuff, but she always reports that like the customers walk in and are shocked and always asking where I'm at. So I really like being kind of the face and the point of contact with everything. So that being said, this is actually the year where I've actually focused on trying to get out of the store more often. So we've hired Ethan, who's been a kind of a mainstay around the shop for years. Yeah, and so he's been cutting me a break here lately this summer.
Nice. DreamESCAPE to me sounds like it embodies the true nature of a family business. You have your mom and your mother-in-law helping build stuff, and your father, and then you have family sitting in when you can't get there. Yeah, so true embodiment of what a family business, what it takes to run a small business, and the effort that gets put in that people don't necessarily see. I've never seen anybody in the store other than you. Not that I go there a lot, but like I understand that statement. So yeah. Moving on. So you kind of touched on it. You have a retail front. What was you know, the drive to eventually open up a retail side for the DreamESCAPE?
So when we were opening, we got keys to the location in May, and then we had to start doing construction. And the whole time we were just thinking this was going to be an escape room. And there was actually a board game store in Leduc at the time who they actually ended up closing down right as we opened our doors as an escape room. So then there was no board game store in Leduc. And so I just kind of figured, with the way our entranceway is laid out, for those who've been there, it's kind of just, the escape rooms are kind of wrapping around other businesses in the back of our kind of location. So there's kind of a long, wide hallway. And in the beginning, I just decided to, well, I'm really big into the hobby, so I will kind of try to fill that void. And looking back at how we started is kind of, it's almost kind of like silly to look how we started, because we started at such a low amount. We didn't have any shelving or anything, so we just started with a table in the front room with games on it. And I remember customers kind of walking in when we advertised board games, and they would make comments like, "Well, I have more board games in my house than you do on your shelf." And that's kind of just the slow grow that we had. Every game that I sold, I just reinvested into getting more games, more shelving, more games, more shelving.
Well, it sounds like an intelligent way to do it. You didn't overextend yourself when you didn't need to. You don't know necessarily what the outcome of trying something new is going to be. So it kind of sounds like a good way to go about it. We hear that it's difficult to make a business out of being in an LGS. Has the income from the retail side helped shape the business, or been advantageous for you?
Very much so. The escape room business is very comparable to like the movie theater business, where it's very much like a Friday night weekend type thing. So that's our busy period, is Friday and Saturday nights essentially. So running the escape rooms during the week, before we started doing that, like, it was just dead. I'd just be sitting behind the desk playing Dota, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, and so when we started carrying that, and at the time, to be honest, I wasn't into trading card games. I was just into board games. So that's all we had. We had board games. It wasn't until we just had customers, or a customer who still comes and plays in the store today, that basically told me, like, "Hey, with the closing of that other store, we don't have anywhere to go. Would you ever consider," and it was Magic the Gathering at the time, carrying Magic the Gathering. So I just basically, with a lot of what I do, I just kind of listen to what the customers and what I'm hearing from the community.
So was it easy for you to make the decision to start carrying retail products like Magic the Gathering and board games, or was it something that you had to really think about whether or not it was worth bringing? Because you hear a few people mention it, so is one or two or five people mentioning it worth investing your business into that side of things?
The board game was easy because I was right on the pulse. I kind of felt like I knew what was hot, what was going on. So bringing in the board games wasn't so much a tough decision. Like I said, we kind of did it slowly. But with the Magic, as a young teen, I was really into Magic. So I had an idea of what I was getting into. And that one I definitely sat on for a while and waited to pull the trigger. And again, I hemmed and hawed, and I actually made a post in like a Leduc board game Facebook group to just get more information of what like an LGS would want to, like what a player in the community would expect an LGS to do when it comes to events and products and stuff like that. Like Commander is huge these days. When I played, Commander wasn't a thing, so I didn't even know what Commander was. So I definitely had a lot of help from the community to kind of guide me on, if you're going to do it, this is what you should do.
Okay, nice. And it worked out, or is working out for you to have that
So
help from
far,
the community?
so
Good.
far, so good. Yeah.
I mean, it's a big step to trust people you don't necessarily know on their opinion on how you as a store owner should, run events and look into. So like, it's a big leap of trust on both sides. So
Yeah, no, you definitely take a couple opinions before making a decision.
yeah. So as a traditional brick and mortar store, do you feel like you're at a disadvantage compared to online stores that sell retail products like Magic the Gathering or board games?
I think so far we're kind of lucky in Canada that Amazon, for whatever reason, doesn't deal with TCGs or board games to the extent is what I see online, or talking to people on forums and stuff like that. They have basically the full catalog in, let's say, like United States, whereas in Canada you can look up a lot of even what you've considered mainstay board games, and they're not, you might find them on Amazon, but they're not like a Prime. They're not stocked and shipped by
Mm-hmm.
Amazon.
Yeah.
So that kind of right now in Canada is kind of helpful compared to some of like the big online stores. Yeah, it's difficult because their pricing is almost unmatchable, I think, for a brick and mortar. They're definitely looking at just pure quantities going out the door. And
Yeah.
I've heard from just talking to other store owners, like some of these websites, like one of the websites controls, again, this is just here, what I've been told, almost 40% of like board game sales throughout Canada. So the amount that they're moving, that's got to be why they're pricing that low. But I don't see a brick and mortar matching that and being successful for
Yeah.
their price. And I'm not saying, they have to jump leaps and bounds above it, but there's definitely some pricing that I just don't think can be reasonably matched.
Yeah. When I had the board game cafe, when we were talking to distributors, none of the distributors that we found would even sell to an online store unless they were brick and mortar. And you actually had to prove that you had a storefront and a retail. Otherwise, they wouldn't sell you. Does that still hold true to this day? Do you know? Like maybe that's one of the things that's kind of helping the local stores survive, I guess, in a cheap online world, is that maybe the distributors are actually helping. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You still have to basically provide, like, I had to make a video to show that I'm a store, walk it through the parking lot to the back room, and then actually just provide legal, like, lease documents and government of Alberta business documents to the distributors for brick and mortar. So that's why, like, with those major websites, the name is different, but I again, this is not info that I have, but I would assume that there's a brick and mortar underlier to that business.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if it's something that's super small that has basically very little square footage that is the cheapest rent that they can find in an industrial, area that they're, getting like 1,000 square feet, and that's good enough, almost like a front.
Uh, well, I know that there was a store in my area that was kind of doing that, and they were forced into getting a brick and mortar.
Well, from DreamEscape's perspective, I'm curious about what keeps the lights on and keeps your business running on a day-to-day basis. You've described the board game part of your business, as well as the card side, as well as the escape room. And there's, I'm sure, other things that you sell, like your typical gaming accessories, dice, sleeves, deck boxes, and snacks as well. I guess if you were just to carve out the whole pie into different slices for your store, what would the biggest slices be?
I think it would still be the escape room, but it would definitely, the size of the pie cutouts would definitely change based on the season. So in the summer, escape rooms, like, and it's been consistent over the 5 years we've been open, we pretty much peter right off. Like, we, instead of having, let's say, 11 bookings on a Saturday, we might get 2 or 3 on like a July Saturday compared to a November Saturday. And that's kind of where the front end retail picks up. Like, we just had a release of Dust Till Dawn. I mean, that really helps happening in July with the other TCGs and board games releasing and still hosting events. And during the summer, it helps keep just kind of feet in the door.
Okay. No, that's really helpful information. And I guess if we were just to set aside the escape room portions, because many of our listeners, they're not lucky enough to have an escape or dream escape in their local communities with the combined escape room and LGS experience there. I guess among the major product lines, is it still the big three card games that drive the vast majority of sales? If you look at the big three card games versus something like board games or Flesh and Blood or Sleeves or Chocolate Bars, that's just something that we hear get posted around social media that the big three are huge and everything else is a little blip. Is that true, or is that, I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
For us, it would not be true. And so I don't know if I just haven't tapped into the market in my 5 years of being around, but it wasn't until after COVID that we kind of pulled the trigger to start launching into the other ones. We were almost just a pure Magic, like just board games and Magic the Gathering. We didn't touch Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! It wasn't until after COVID we started carrying the other two, and then it's kind of been a back and forth war of trying to get people to realize, because like I've told people, it's like I just spent the last at the time, let's say 4 years, telling people that we don't have Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. Now I have to try to gather them back, let them know I have it. So for us, Yu-Gi-Oh has actually been probably one of the weaker ones that we've had, to the point where I've really scaled that one back. I've tried to do some big pushes to run events and uh, you know we are a Konami store, so I did have a lot of promos and stuff to give away, but after a couple successful events, it went back, petered back out. And with Pokemon, we've never ran a Pokemon event. Yeah, the other two, we just seem to be fighting to try to get people to know that we have Pokemon. So uh, I know it seems like I'm pandering because I'm on a Flesh and Blood podcast, but actually for us, Flesh and Blood is probably bigger. Well, not probably, I know for sure it's bigger to us than Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, probably combined.
Well, it shouldn't be pandering if it's true. I mean, I'm sure we're both happy to hear that. But I am also curious about if you're able to share something about even something like your margin, or how happy are you to move boxes or booster packs of something like Flesh and Blood versus something like Magic. Like, is Magic also something that's driven by volume because there is more competition, there's online sellers, there could be people buying from Amazon and all of that?
Yeah, so with Magic being around for so long, I find that there's so much competition. It's not just like the Walmarts and the EB Games that you're competing against. Being so close to Edmonton, we are still, competing with the Edmonton stores, and it can just be a race to the bottom amongst stores. I've seen posts on Facebook where, just a player asks who has the cheapest box, and I can see like store owners replying to the post, basically just undercutting each other down to the bottom. And that can be, it just leads to very poor margins, basically, if you want to remain competitive and try to keep moving boxes.
So Flesh and Blood has a MAP policy that's in place in North America. Does something like that help, do you think, a retailer like yourself? And I understand other product lines like Magic have gone the other way and have even done away with MSRP. So I guess two different approaches to tackling this. Like, what are your thoughts on Flesh and Blood's approach compared to some others?
Having the map there, I think, is very helpful to other stores. There is kind of just, who knows what would happen if it wasn't there. I think in the end, I'd rather have the map, but basically with any release, and I'm not sure what happens in Calgary, but you can just basically expect that every store, and again, if you want to stay competitive, is just going to be advertising the map. Like no store, I don't think, is going to sell at MRSP. There's too many stores that are just going to jump, like right off the bat, pre-orders are going to be map. That if you're a store trying to make a higher margin and sell closer to MRSP, you're just not going to get pre-orders. Is kind of what I think. But that being said, if the map wasn't there, then you could again have just this race to the bottom that would be endless. So overall, I think that the map's a good thing.
Got it. And have you seen other companies experiment with things like a map in place? Like, for someone like myself, not being savvy to the retailer side of the business, I'm always wary about, certain bad actors trying to circumvent the map one way or another. I guess from your experience, having been a store owner for many years, have other games or other products tried putting these policies in place, and were they successful?
For what we sell in store, I can't think of anywhere else. The MRSP for Magic the Gathering was already abolished before I even became a thing like that. So I never really experienced a time where it had controlled pricing. But when it comes to board games, it's basically, here's what you buy it for, and this is the release date. Some board games have exclusive rights to who gets to sell on eBay and Amazon. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be any other rules in place for pricing.
Are there any higher margin like products versus others? I don't have any insight into distributor pricing, but one thing that I hear people say online quite a bit is, hey, if you want to support your LGS from a bang for your buck perspective, maybe try buying some chocolate bars or buy your sleeves. And I'm not sure how true that is or isn't. I mean, are certain products just higher margin? You can get away with taking more margin versus something like boxes or booster packs where there could be a lot of that competition and pressure to sell at map?
Yeah, if you're going purely by a percentage base, then it would probably be like a bottle of water. Just even if they're charging $1, just purely percentage based, but dollar value, then it starts getting into the more expensive stuff. So even though the percentage is a lot less, like for Magic the Gathering, for me to just try to compete in the area, I think we're hovering just over 20%, which, like you just said yourself, not too savvy with what other industries are doing for markup and such. So I can see what I'm doing, and I kind of have an idea what other stores are doing just based on assuming that we have the same kind of distributor. But when it comes to a totally different industry, I don't know if LGSs or TCGs and board games are like way behind or on par. I hear like phrases used called keystone markup, where basically if you buy it for $1, expect to sell it for double. So you're buying for $1 and looking to sell for $2. I don't think we make keystone markup on anything except for probably the chocolate bars and the pop. After that, it's just kind of like for a board game, again, just trying to stay competitive in the area. We're probably looking at, if I hope that if I can buy one and sell one, I pay for half of the next one, essentially. Whereas I know from just reading online and not being in the other industries, a lot of people talk about trying to pay for a full second version. So if you buy one, you're paying off the second one, and that doesn't seem to exist in what we're doing.
I guess I have a follow-up question to sort of margins, and we're going to jump into fab content soon here. So what is your philosophy, I guess, or thoughts surrounding prices for armories or skirmish events or pre-releases? Is it something that you're trying to make money on as a store, or are you trying to use it as, we've heard people refer to as sort of like marketing costs? So they don't care necessarily about whether or not the event makes money, as opposed to getting your name out there that you're holding these events and you have products to sell for games like Fab or for Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, this has been a kind of a topic I know that I've discussed with before, even in the Alberta Fab chat there. For the most part, the armories are almost neutral. I think for me, almost, again, a lot of this is basically just what, like, my opinion or what I have found to work for us. So I don't really know too much what other owners or how they think about doing it. But you run it as kind of like basically breaking even. And my idea is that you're getting the players in the store. Hopefully they're buying other stuff, and on come release time, hopefully you're the store they choose to put their pre-order in with.
Right.
That being said, I know there is also just like, for instance, you're trying to run an event. It's like, let's say the bigger events, there are some organizing that goes into play. There's like the judge costs that hopefully players remember that we're trying to sort into the price. And then the other thing, and I guess this is kind of just like a question I posed in the Discord, is when stores, let's say they have an event that is bigger than what their capacity is, so they have to rent a venue. A lot of players are okay with paying the extra price, knowing that the store had to rent a venue to host the event. That being said, what, like, if a store took a section of their business out to host events, shouldn't that store also see a benefit of providing and having the space there for when the events come up to be able to host it without having to look to rent a venue?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and everyone has to remember that having a nice space, a clean space, with good ventilation, washrooms, and all that, none of that comes free. So it's an excellent point that everyone should remember.
It's something I like to talk about whenever a store has to defend their position or feels like they should. Like, players are cheap. Like in any hobby, people try to access it as cheap as they can because money doesn't grow on trees and we can't just pluck it. So I understand where people come from. And I like to, as a former business owner, I like to point out to people when I can that there is more to the event than what you as a consumer see. And Travis did a great job explaining all the little things and nuances that go into it. And I find that sometimes player bases need to be reminded that there is more than you're seeing that went into this, like you said, like judge costs, or if you were going to rent a venue, do you pull your player base? Is this something that you guys want so that, we can only hold X people and we know we're going to go above that, but your entry is going to go up by $10. Is everybody okay with that, or whatever the margin is, right? And I do find that as an owner, you get a bit more like leniency or respect from the player base, that like they don't judge you as harshly. They're like, well, I paid $50 and all I got was 5 packs. Well, a business can't typically run on a negative deficit. And especially like smaller stores too, that they don't necessarily have tons of free flowing capital to, just help you out because they're a nice guy. So I do like that you were very candid with your answer. And I do want people to kind of think about things like that when they're assessing of what the value of an event is worth. Because you might not see everything that is going on for a store. And most of the time, I think that a lot of our stores here locally are not hosing their players, and they're doing the best that they can to offer a great product and a great event at a reasonable price.
I think that it's a lot of just respect and honesty going both ways. And I think players can see when I'm doing my best to make it as worthwhile as possible. And so I mean, I like to think that there's a trust that goes back and forth. And like I said, like we've discussed, I'm the guy who's there most often, so I've become kind of the face of the business of DreamESCAPE. So for us, anyways, I do kind of like to protect that a little bit. Where if you're coming to DreamESCAPE, you know that I am doing my best to make it worth your while, or at least for everything that comes in, I'm doing my best to make it rewarding to come and play or shop at DreamESCAPE.
I would like to point out to our listeners that you're one of the 2 most active stores in our Discord. I don't know if this is like your personality or a philosophy, but do you think that your involvement in a non, I guess, sales way in the community, do you think that helps garner that respect? And do you think that helps does that make it more comfortable for you to come out and sort of, I guess, talk about stuff like, hey, we're just trying to do the best we can, and have that conversation, that two-way conversation with the community? Because I know some stores, we don't hear anything about them, and we don't know why they're doing things, and they don't owe us that as a community. But again, I think it's a nice service to provide to the community to give a little context into what it is that's happening and why things the way they are. Do you think so? Anyway, so I guess my question is, do you think that your relationship with the community helps that, or do you think it's just a personality thing? You would be doing it, whether or not you were, in the Discord as much as you are.
I like to think that it helps it. I think it helps make me more approachable. I mean, I haven't really done a great job of separating myself from the business. Like the Discord that I use in Alberta FAB and for DreamESCAPE is basically just a re-nicknamed version of my own personal account. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, and I talk basically, yeah, like you said, I try to talk openly, and I try to have discussions with people. Like I mentioned, that whole conversation about renting venues is a discussion I had in general chat with people. So I'm open to the discussion, and I always like to have the chat. And I think that it can happen without anyone thinking that I'm fighting the fight for the LGS owners against the against the players. I just like to try to have a discourse and for people can kind of hopefully see both sides of things.
Guess just to expand a little bit on some of Shea's questions there, wouldn't it just be easier, and this is a devil's advocate question, but wouldn't it just be easier to move product and not have to deal with players at all?
That'd be boring.
Are you bored as a small business owner that's in charge of the whole thing and only employee behind the register though?
You're saying like if we didn't host events, we just carried FAB and just hoped that players came in and bought the product and left type thing? Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, is there another motivation besides, I guess you say from a financial perspective, you just break even on the events, and sometimes players are understanding, sometimes they're a little less understanding if the entry fee to something like a Skirmish or ProQuest has to be a little bit higher. Like, there must be another motivation besides just
if you
dollars, right? Or maybe
very
not.
often
I don't know. Tell me about it.
If you get a TCG player near TCG packs, they tend to want to open those packs. So there is just something about getting them into the building. and they're gonna, like, again, it's a support thing, but yeah, you host the events, and I know in the notes it talked about residual sales. I do think it's worth the residual sales. They come in. Some of our Magic Commander players like to joke around that it's the weekly tithe for DreamESCAPE to come and and buy product for Commander night. So, yeah, I it's I think it's worth having the events just to have players come and play. And I actually, and like, I take a little bit of pride being able to host, like, the events. I thought it was pretty cool, and we got our first, like, pro quest with Fab. Like, we ran Magic, like I said, for like 4 years before we even jumped off into any other TCG, and we didn't run anything close to that. And then now with Flesh and Blood, we're running like Road to Nationals and Pro Quests.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess my last question about in-person play is: Are you aware, or I know Flesh and Blood, sometimes they allocate different products or things like the buy a box promos based on the organized play attendance for armories and that kind of stuff. And of course, that's also how they allocate their skirmishes and tier 2 events and up. But is that true for other games as well? Is that another incentive to run organized play, or does that not really factor in for your store?
For Flesh and Blood, yeah, the buy box promo was a new thing with Dust Till Dawn, but just with more experience with Magic, it's not so much the normal product, like the day-to-day set boosters and draft. It's when the, all ultra sought after collection packs or Phyrexian bundles come out, is when it kind of weighs into how much you're supporting the game, how much product you're moving, and stuff like that. So those gift bundles and collector bundles and stuff, where they're actually, the margins increase just because the demand heavily outweighs the supply. That's where we get kind of measured for how much we're doing, I guess.
Okay, that's interesting. So Magic also supports stores that support in-store play by allocating those special products as well. Then, is that
Yeah,
right?
like pre-release kits for sure. They
Got
can
it.
see how much you're doing for in-store play, so you only get so many pre-release kits come pre-release time based on those metrics.
Based on your experience with both Magic and Flesh and Blood now, do you feel like LSS is providing appropriate support and incentives for being a store like yourself that really drives that in-person play, or do you feel like something like Magic does it better with the system that you described?
I think LSS is doing a great job with the armory kits, and I know there's always kind of, with the higher higher events, there's been some disappointment lately with which cards they choose to cold foil for first prize. But for like week to week events with the armory, I'm a big fan of the armory kits, the play mats. It's interesting just how sought after some of those promos end up being in the community, that I think that they're doing a fantastic job of driving in-store play. I mean, for me being out in Leduc, I don't know how many players would make the effort to drive south, anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes for some of our regular players, if it wasn't for not just the armory kits, but the whole XP system that Fab has in place. I think has done wonders for kind of an outlying store like myself.
You mentioned earlier in the podcast that you were primarily Magic when you first got into retail. Can you share with us how or why or what catapulted you into picking up Fab?
Once again, just listening to the community. I was actually pretty hesitant about doing it and kind of pushed back on it for a while, which I regretted, because I think if I got in when I was first told about it, I could have got, like, from first edition Arcane Rising. But with COVID happening, like Magic, we couldn't run in-store events at the time.
Mhm.
Magic sales were way down. I picked up a second full-time job basically, and I wasn't sure if we were making it out of COVID. The last thing that was really on the radar was to start promoting and pushing a whole nother trading card game that had just started up. So I was very hesitant against it. And as time went on, I guess I just decided to give it a shot after chatting again with just there's a few players in the community. A big one actually was Hugh, was one of the original
Okay. Yeah.
people to actually kind of put it in my ear to start trying to get it in.
Nice. With conversations that I've had with store owners in the past, being, I guess, burnt on flash in the pan games that have come out, how likely are you to look at new products in the future, maybe stuff like Grand Archive or what other games that come out? Is you sound like you have a positive interaction with Flesh and Blood. So does that carry forward to new games, or are you still maybe skeptical like some more experienced game owners might be?
I'm probably on the more skeptical side still. I still think that there's just so many TCGs. Like, we did bring in MetaZoo for a little while. And I know that they're still coming out with sets and stuff, but I eventually just decided to bow out of it. I feel like I'm always coming in right after like the alpha set launches and it's super
Yep.
hot. I had a customer just actually right on topic within the last couple of days here. I had a customer come in, ask for this new trading card game called Shadowverse Evolve.
Yep.
And I looked it up, never heard of it, looked it up, saw that I could order it, told him I would order it for him. So he put in a couple like special order for some boxes. The order gets, shipped and everything's coming, and the distributor sells out or locks out the orders in the meantime. And while it's coming, I have 3 phone calls from 3 different people over like a course of 2 days of people asking, do I have Shadowverse? Can you get Shadowverse? After so many phone calls, I decide basically to give it a shot, but
Right.
I kind of miss out on that initial launch, right? So with that, and another one that comes to mind of more recently is One Piece, right? The One Piece trading card game, like that one's been like the first couple sets have all been seemingly pretty red hot, and so now trying to come in later, does it stay as hot as it's been, or can it, again with Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not just a matter of how hot it is, but can you tap into the market or let people know that you even have it is also kind of a challenge.
Do you feel like your cautious approach has saved you over the years, or do you feel like it's restricted you because of opportunities, like you said, starting with Arcane Rising First Edition? Because, I mean, you're pointing out some missed opportunities, but at the same time, I can probably think of like 5 different trading card games that had a lot of hype and that died, and probably would have been stuck holding a lot of dead product if you did jump in.
TCGs will always be coming and going, so that's where I kind of actually just weigh my losses on missing out on whatever the alpha boxes might be. But that is actually a question I still ask myself of what I'm doing the best thing to be doing. Always kind of scaling onto the safer side. And it's not just with new product; it's with existing product as well. Like you can still get a bad set. I mean, we've had success with every Flesh and Blood set, but with like, picking on Magic, it's not every set has been, well received. And so I think my safe approach has saved me on some of those scenarios where I don't have a back room full of product that might take me 3 years to chew through. Has it saved me more than hurt me? That I do not know. I wonder all the time.
Outside of the financial risk of picking up a new product, is there something else that you, I guess, consider? You kind of mentioned earlier, like maybe losing a player base because you did get into it enough or soon enough, or something like it's got to go somewhere on the shelves. So that means that you're taking out something else off the shelf and you're trying to pick up this new product. Is there, other risks outside of something like that that you consider before grabbing a new game?
Yeah, definitely. Like for us, with just kind of the small entryway, we're kind of getting close to max capacity with that as well. So yeah, there's that kind of thought. I actually was just speaking with Sally yesterday about Pokemon singles, because we've never touched Pokemon singles, and I know that's what he does uh,
Yeah.
a lot of. So I was getting his take on that, but in the end, I kind of told him right now, one of the biggest thing, like, thanks for all the info. One of the biggest things hurting us is just like, even if I wanted to jump into Pokemon singles, I'd need a new kind of display case. And where is that display case going? But when it comes to new product too, like with Disney Lorcana coming out, it's not just, if you're going to support a game, the players don't want you to see you just buying like, oh, he brought in a couple booster boxes, right? Like if you're going to support the product with something like that, like generally they want like the booster boxes, the gift sets, the startup decks. A lot
Yeah.
of time the players are going to choose the store that actually, like, there's a difference between just having the product in and supporting the product, right? So
Yeah.
if I just had a couple booster boxes of Lorcana on the shelf, but they're actually looking to play and they need this, like they want the starter decks, they want the promo kits and stuff like that, like they're gonna probably gravitate towards a store that is carrying the full line of product compared to the store that's just got the packs on the shelf. And I think that also, help choose with Flesh and Blood as well, right? And that's with running the events, it comes into play,
Yeah.
where you might be able to find a store that has Flesh and Blood, but if they just have it on the back shelf collecting dust, then it might affect the player's decision of where to spend their money.
So switching back to Fab, and you've spoken a lot now about how people have motivated you to pick up Fab or other games and how you branched out. There are listeners from around North America, potentially in other places as well, where they're looking for a place to play Fab, but they don't have a local game store that supports the game, or their game or the store owner is reluctant to get into a game because Magic is paying all the bills or another game. I guess, what advice would you have for players to try to get their LGS on board? And at the same time, can you share, maybe from an owner to owner perspective, what would you tell that LGS as well?
In a small community, if it's just the one person, one of the biggest hindrances that Flesh and Blood has in Canada specifically is that the distribution is very specific and kind of isolated, being that the distributor that they use basically just carries a very limited amount of stuff. So going back to my Shadowverse example, I didn't have to try to go open up a whole new account with a different distributor to bring in Shadowverse for that player. So that player asked for Shadowverse. I checked my already current distributor and I was able to just tack it onto an already coming order. Flesh Blood's a little bit trickier because you need to open a new account. And again, I'm not sure what it's like these days with print runs and stuff, but I remember when we first got in, like I got allocated one case of Tales First Edition. And then it also was kind of rough for shipping because when I order from my main distributor, I like to just load up with everything and they carry everything. I can get board games, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, puzzles, uh, escape room games, sleeves, accessories, deck boxes, binders. Everything in our store can come almost from one distributor, and so then the shipping cost is split amongst all the product, where ordering for Flesh and Blood, you're kind of stuck just ordering for Flesh and Blood. And when you get allocated one case, you're basically paying shipping on one case and you can't up it. And so unfortunately, Flesh and Blood is a little bit tougher to just have a store owner bring in a couple booster boxes here and there just to test it out. It's kind of a bigger leap, which is unfortunate because I think that the game would benefit if we could get it into more stores.
Yeah, we've heard a few stories about some challenges with the distribution scheme in Canada, and of course it would be different in other places in the world. But what I'm hearing is that from the store owner's perspective, it's not as easy as just tacking on an extra case of something to an already existing order, and it's as simple as that. For a store to branch into a new product line, there's potential difficulties on the back end, like setting up these distributor accounts that, to be honest, someone like me, I wouldn't even think about when asking someone to dabble into something. It could be a bigger ask than it seems. How big of a community like would you need to go through that kind of pain? Like, did you say for Flesh and Blood you had to go through that pain to get one case of Tails? Like, how big was the demand at the time that you could see to motivate you to go through those additional hoops?
Magic had really muddied the waters when it came to competitive play. And so we had a lot of kind of players that were interested in competitive play in TCGs in general. And one of the biggest things I heard about Flesh and Blood when I was deciding to bring it in was that there was a very clear path to, you know, pro tours and stuff like that, if for people that were interested. And there was, even when we first brought Flesh and Blood in, there was a big migration of Magic players over to Flesh and Blood that kind of, who knows if it was just a timing or if actually Flesh and Blood did spark something with WotC. Who knows? I have no idea. But they did. WotC did put out and kind of clear up and fix the, you know, the Magic, you know, path to playing on the Pro Tour shortly after, you know, and it could have just been COVID clearing up. But before COVID and during COVID, you ask a lot of Magic players how to get to the Pro Tour, and I don't think they could tell you. Whereas, yeah, Flesh and Blood made it a lot easier. And LSS, it was that definitely seemed to be a big thing that they were going after was the competitive scene. So with that, and looking to kind of fill up extra nights during the week with the event, I decided to give it a shot because it was actually some of our Magic players that were pushing for it.
Is that competitive circuit important for you to see because it shows a level of commitment from the company that's making the game, or do you know that that's just going to motivate the players in your area to support the game? Like, what's the big benefit of that?
I think it just motivates the players to be out playing, trying to get singles for the top deck and keep up with the game as it evolves. Whereas if there's not that, you can still kind of, you know, check the websites and see what's good in the any given meta of what's going on, but you kind of just showing up playing with, you're not gaining, you're not going towards anything. That's again, like I mentioned earlier with the XP points, I think that's, you know, that's a motivator. The armory prizing is a motivator. The path to playing at nationals or wanting to go, I mean, with our community, a lot of players want to go because they don't want to be the odd man out, right? Like they don't, four of their friends are going to Montreal or wherever nationals is that year. They don't want to stay home. They want to be joining in on the fun, right?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thanks for that. Can you give us honest opinion if you had a friend that was an LGS owner in somewhere in North America and they were on the fence about adding FAB to their store? Would you recommend it? And I understand that you might have a biased opinion because of how FAB came into your store, I guess, but you think the average store, is it something that you would recommend?
Again, I'm probably just going to fade back to my community answer. I don't, but it's not just Flesh and Blood. I think it's anything. I wouldn't recommend them bring in Magic if no one's asking for
Right.
Magic the Gathering. Like that's where just kind of the benefit, like I said, of me being at the desk, I find is every day as I kind of get to chat and I enjoy chatting with all the players in the store. I can kind of keep my ear to the ground. But yeah, it's nothing against Flesh and Blood. It's just you got to kind of, I think you got to hear what the community is. So it doesn't even matter, you know, Pokemon, Magic, you want to call them the big three. I wouldn't even advise bringing those in if the community doesn't want them, because those are supposed to be the big three. But I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of dead in the water at my store. So
No, thanks, and that's really good advice. in general. So let's just move on to some fun questions before we bring things to a close here. What's your favorite moment or memory when it comes to being the owner of DreamESCAPE so far?
It's probably every time when a player leaves the escape room saying that that was their favorite escape room ever, and it's one thing if we're in Leduc where there was no escape room, so we actually get the benefit of introducing a lot of people to escape rooms, but it feels pretty good when someone like takes a second to explain to me that they've done 50 escape rooms across all different countries and provinces, and they still think that that one was one of their top or best rooms. So being that we're designing and building them, that it feels good to hear from about feels good to know that what we're building is being enjoyed.
Is there one particular moment that stands out? Like, was there a little kid that jumped like 6 feet up in the air after he got a puzzle correct, or is there any singular moment that will put a good picture in my head?
We've had 2 proposals, like wedding proposals, that have been both said yes, so that's a bonus. But that was kind of a cool thing to kind of the husband or the person proposing would come in like 2 days before, and we'd come up with this game plan of where we're going to hide the ring, because like one of our rooms is a casino heist where you're robbing a diamond. Well, we replaced the fake diamond with the real diamond. Like, we kind of came up with this plan to replace it with the real diamond.
Wow.
So when she found it, he was already on his knees behind her, and so it was just kind of a cool moment to happen within the store.
That sounds pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Have you ever looked into escape room conventions or seminars? Is that something that you have gone to or would go to or even considered?
Yeah, things that I should be going to probably. It's just finding the time off to go, and I don't know. Again, trapping myself I made my own prison, trapping myself at the store every day.
Yep.
So I've always looked into it. There is actually kind of like a large escape room meeting that I think that happens every year in Toronto.
Yeah.
That I've just never gone to, which may not be a good thing.
Fair enough. I guess one final question. Do you have a Flesh and Blood related moment that you would like to share?
Yeah, it's probably getting to host like the Pro Quest, or it was just cool to be chosen as the store to do that. Yeah, any give. I don't know if there's a given moment. I think it's cool that we have so many players that are actually like top within Canada. And even tonight's event that we put on for the draft, like, we're trying to create a more competitive atmosphere or give some practice to some of the players going to nationals. And we have not all of them could show up, but if we could get a date where everyone could show up, like we have 8 just in Edmonton alone, not including everyone from Calgary. So we could run a full pod if we wanted to, and if we could find a date and time that worked for everybody, it's just nice to say that we like those players play in my store type thing, that they're coming out, they're playing.
I know from talking to some of them that they, even I want to extend a thank you for you taking time out of, your day to potentially shut down the store and give them the opportunity to practice. Like you said, you trap yourself in a prison, but you're there all the time. And I know that, they're very thankful that that's something that you would do for them. And a lot of stores out there don't have that kind of connection with their player base. And, myself and them, I know we definitely appreciate somebody like you in the community that would do that for them, because you get basically zero gain out of it. So it's nice to see that your involvement is obviously more than just financial based. So thank you for that.
Are you going to feel proud if someone from Alberta wins nationals?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and not just Edmonton area too, because I mean, you guys all support the store too. Coming up with whenever we have a big event, you guys get the 2, 3, or 4 vehicles all carpooling up here. So
yeah,
when it comes to like those bigger events, it's nice to have that Battle of Alberta happening all the time in within the stores.
Yeah.
One of these days, I'll have to find a way to come down there, play in an event.
Sure, we'd love to have you.
Absolutely. Well, we're about to wrap things up here, Travis. Thank you so much for all of your thoughtful answers. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just thanks for having me out.
No problem. If people wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way or multiple ways to reach out to you?
We're pretty much DreamESCAPE Gaming on everything. So Instagram, DreamESCAPE Gaming, Facebook, DreamESCAPE Gaming. We have a Discord that I think you can find through the socials, but again, messaging any of those socials is basically like messaging me. So I like to joke around that I have a 24-hour drive-through window. Some of the players will message me at like midnight with a stock request, and they're shocked when I reply to them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. You can reach us at IP2 Podcast on YouTube, IP2 Podcast on Twitter, and IP2 Podcast at wraith.social at Mastodon. Thank you. I mean, Adam is also a paramedic or something like that. Did you know him before in some way?
That was a very, hey, you're Canadian, I know Mike from Toronto question there, Felix.
Okay, look, at least from the same geographical region. Like, give me a break here.